Good morning. This is Allison Pena with Worldwide ERC. Thanks to everyone for connecting and welcome to today's webinar program, What Does Your Intern Program Say About Your Organization? Sponsored by SIRVA. Please take a moment to review Worldwide ERC's webinar disclaimer. And now I would like to go over a few housekeeping announcements. If you are experiencing technical difficulties joining the WebEx session today, please dial 866-779-3239 from the U.S. Email questions may be sent to support@webex.com. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you have a question during the presentation, you may submit it online at any time. To submit your questions, please use the Q&A tab, which is located in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. Simply click on the tab and type your question into the dialog box at the bottom of the screen, and then click the Send button. Please note that all written questions selected during this webinar will be answered publicly. We do expect a high volume of questions and will attempt to answer as many as possible. Lastly, a link to this handout will be included in an email scheduled to go out later this afternoon. Please be on the lookout for it. It will come to you from messenger@webex.com. During this webinar, we will be polling the audience at times. When a poll is opened, it will appear in the polling dialog box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen below the Q&A box. The question will appear in both the slide and the polling dialog box. Simply select your answer and click Submit. The results will display in the same dialog box after the poll has closed. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 CRP and 1 GMS credit. If you hold your CRP designation and would like to receive credit for this webinar, you will need to use the CRP Credits Management Portal, which may be linked to from your profile page after logging into the Worldwide ERC website. The seminar ID for today's session is 15721. If you are a GMS seeking CE credit for this webinar, you must include the name and date of this session on your GMS renewal application at the time you apply for recertification. The renewal application is available online. HRCI information is noted here for the live event only. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Kathy Burrows has more than 22 years of experience in global relocation, real estate, and account management. As Director of Global Consulting, Kathy works with current and potential clients to ensure that their mobility programs are providing the support and governance necessary to align with defined organizational and talent objectives and priorities. Her experience provides a depth of knowledge that enables her to blend talent management, program governance, and mobility objectives with operations excellence to support a client's vision of mobility support. Kathy holds both a Certified Relocation Professional and Global Mobility Specialist designations from Worldwide ERC, and has been a 2-time recipient of SIRVA's Leadership Award in Client-Centric Performance. Angela Chrz joined SIRVA in 2001 and gained a broad understanding of the relocation process and industry in her time with the company through positions held in a range of capacities, including client reporting, operations, project management, and consulting services. In her current role, Angela works with clients to benchmark their policies against other companies within their industry or other criteria significant to the customer. She analyzes and reports on benchmark findings, making suggestions for modifications to meet the client's individual needs. She then works with customers to design, write, implement, and maintain relocation programs and policies. In addition to her relocation experience, Angela has earned her Certified Relocation Professional designation from Worldwide ERC, as well as CERC Relocation Specialist designation from the Canadian Employee Relocation Council. She has served on the Minnesota Employee Relocation Council, or MERC, MERC's Board of Directors, as the Education Committee co-chair, and continues to be heavily involved with MERC. I am delighted to welcome both Kathy and Angela. Thank you for joining us. I will now turn the program over to Kathy.
Thanks, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd like to give you just a high-level overview of the things that we'd like to talk about today for you. We're going to start off by defining interns and what they mean to organizations. We're going to talk about aligning your programs with talent needs. We're going to deep dive into structuring your program and how your program can be designed and the things that go into it, how to evaluate your program, program redesign. We're going to take a look at a couple case studies. We're going to talk about maintaining your program, finishing up with some key takeaways from today's presentation, and then provide an opportunity for some questions and answers at the end if we have time. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Angela, and she's going to take us through defining an intern.
Thanks, Kathy. So to kick off the presentation today, let's think about the different ways organizations might define interns. Interns could be summer help for project work with or without the intent to ultimately hire, a potential employee the company may want to hire at the end of the internship, possible talent to be groomed for permanent and or leadership roles in the organization, similarly, potential leadership candidates. The intern program can even be a starting point of a leadership development program. An extension of business relationships. Some organizations have relationships established with certain universities they often recruit from. There we go. The intern program should be well aligned with talent in order to meet the needs of the organization and its objectives with regard to one of its most important assets, its people. So what is talent looking for? They're looking for a program to meet the needs of the business while keeping in mind budgeting constraints. If a program is too rich, the business won't be able to afford to apply the program. They want a competitive program that will help attract and secure top talent. To do this, it's crucial to identify who the company is competing with for talent. It could be based on industry, geographic location, or the expertise that's being sought after. They want a program that embraces the branding and the culture of the organization and mobility function for a cohesive feel. If the company's culture is a paternalistic one, for example, it makes more sense to have a higher touch or more robust intern program. The program needs to be easy to understand and administer, or again, it won't be utilized or applied appropriately, which can lead to inconsistencies and an inequitable program. And we know that inequities can lead to discrimination claims. Insight into the program performance needs to be available to track and report on areas such as costs, feedback from users like interns, talent, recruiters, and stakeholders, as well as on return on investment. And accountability for users of the program with roles and responsibilities defined in order to enable quick resolution of any issues that could arise. Interns today are millennials, so when considering what motivates interns, we should take a look at the general characteristics of the population. So in general, they're multitaskers. To appeal to this characteristic, make sure that there's career flexibility. This can translate to offering exposure to a variety of different responsibilities and experiences throughout the internship, as well as a career path for growth that could include a future rotational assignment to allow the intern and the company to find the best fit. They're connected, which doesn't even seem like a big enough word to describe just how connected they are. And they're also tech savvy, so it's important to leverage technology as much as possible. This can be through apps and websites to assist with anything from information regarding their internship to helping them connect with other interns in the community. They appreciate and expect work-life balance and flexibility. Interns should be informed of any company-sponsored events outside the workplace, any charities and volunteerism that's supported by the organization, maybe fitness and health-related programs that are offered, flexibility with schedules, and possibly even the option to work from home occasionally where possible and appropriate would be well received also. They're team-oriented. They enjoy collaborating and building friendships with colleagues. So you'll want to let them know about any teamwork opportunities and also to make sure the office space is conducive to teamwork. They appreciate being informed, so it's best to be transparent about all aspects of the company and the position they'll be filling as an intern, both the good and the bad. Don't overly sugarcoat. And also providing feedback regularly is important to this population. In a 2018 internship and co-op survey done by the National Association of Colleges for Employees reports that an average of about 46% of interns will convert to full-time hires. As we touched on, this is ideal and offers the best return on investment because you've spent all that time recruiting them, getting them to the new location, integrating them into the company and the team. So ultimately hiring them is great for the company and also for the intern. So interns who accept offers tend to perform better and stay longer than other types of hires too. That same NACE report notes that about 71% of those interns hired with direct experience with the same organization will still be in place 1 year later, and about 50% will stick around for 5 years. So it's critical to recognize the fact that interns are assessing you just as much as you're assessing them. They want to make sure the culture and values of the organization align with theirs and incorporates those motivating factors that we just discussed on the previous slide. They want to make sure there's a path for advancement for them before committing to the company and that their long-term vision is possible and supported at the company. To help ensure internships are accepted and successful, it's important to acknowledge and address some of the common worries for interns. Even if company assistance won't be provided in all the areas, it's best to just sort of get them out in the open and talk about them so they're not worried about them. Some common worries include, will I be able to find housing I can afford? With regard to housing, let interns know who their resources are and where they can be found. The company can assist with helping to connect interns to establish roommate situations to help make housing more affordable in a location where they probably don't know anyone to room with. How will I pay for housing? And what if I don't have enough money to live once I arrive? So you'll want to make sure you're upfront about the cost of living in the internship location to avoid any surprises. How will I get to work? Inform interns of local public transportation, carpool, or any other options that are available. How will I meet other interns? Set up activities and a virtual workplace where interns can connect. So as we talked about, providing a sense of community is important for this group and can help them become more invested in their internship and the company. I don't know what to expect or who will help me if I run into an issue. Make sure all aspects of the internship and company are clearly laid out, including all resources available inside and outside the organization. And remember that millennials appreciate transparency. So now Kathy will take you through some of the ways to structure your program.
Great, thanks, Angela. So as we start to look at your programs and how to structure it and what to put in it, we're going to start off with our first polling question today. The question is what role does mobility play with interns at your organization? Does mobility have no involvement at all with interns? Does mobility support the interns internally within the company? Or does mobility provide support through an RMC for interns? So we'll give you a few minutes to finish that polling question, but then we'll move to our next topic here, which is stakeholders and their roles within the organization. So as you look at intern support within your organization, it's important to identify who's responsible for the intern program. Who are the stakeholders? How do they touch the program? Who has the say for how much can be spent? How are the businesses tied into the interns? Who can make decisions as far as what benefits are offered, what your program design looks like, and what are their roles from a day-to-day aspect with managing that program? And then what role does mobility play with interns today within your organization? It may be deeply integrated with interns, it may not be. But depending upon where you are in your organization, what could your role be or what should it be with the role of interns and how mobility can support that group of stakeholders within the organization? So Allison, can you show us what our survey results were for our first polling question? Okay, so of the folks that have answered our questions, we have 35% have no involvement with mobility, 39% provide mobility with an outside RMC, and then 20% of the organization supported internally. So we're kind of split fairly equally here, which is interesting because there really is no right answer as far as the type of support. It really is a matter of what works well for your organization and making sure that the businesses are supported by the interns and that there is support provided for the interns that make sense for the organization's business needs, but then also understanding what benefits mobility has that could benefit that organization. And so we're going to talk a little bit further about getting to understand your organization a little bit more and how the benefits of mobility can be applied towards your program. Thanks, Allison. So the next step would really be to take a look at the intent of how interns are used within an organization. So does the organization value the intern as just summer labor, or is the intern a prospective employee, someone that they want to kind of test out, groom as a future employee? So it's really helpful to understand how the businesses are using interns as part of their business initiatives. It's good to take a look at the level of college student that's supported by your program and what level of college student best supports the business needs, whether they're undergraduate or graduate students or doctorate students. The type of support that could be potentially offered for those different types of populations could be different. So you'd want to make sure that your mobility program acknowledges that there could be different levels of interns that may need different support, and have that discussion with the intern group. Take a look at the methodology for support. Is the intent of the organization to provide full support for the employee for all of their costs in getting to the internship, or is it really a partial support where both the organization and the employee take ownership in contributing towards the cost? So it's good to kind of understand where the mentality of the business or the organization is around the support for getting them to the internship. And what is the value of the experience for the employee? Does the business want to provide kind of that paternal setup where it's very hands-on, very guided, very full support? Or is it more of a hands-off experience where the employees provided more of an allowance and they kind of self-service themselves? It really depends upon your organization, your culture, and the way that you want to have that experience be for the employee. Don't forget the impact of locations. Depending upon where employees will be for their internships, whether they're in remote locations or whether they're in big cities like New York or San Francisco, the level of support can be very different, and the costs for their program support could be also very different. So you'll want to take that into consideration. And then also you're looking at whether it's a domestic within border move for the intern or whether they're going to be crossing borders. So when you're looking at that intent, with a program design, what approach works best for your organization? Should you have a global program that covers everyone around the globe? Should you have a regional program that you have an Americas program or an Asia program or a European program? Or do you have country-specific programs where you have a US intern program, a Canada program, a China program? Maybe it's a combination of all three. It really is understanding what your businesses need from an intern support and providing mobility support that meets those needs. And it may be done in one size fits all, but you may need several approaches to best support the business for what they're looking to do with their interns. Branding. Branding is really important. When you look at the things that are provided and the way that you communicate with the interns as they're coming in and going to their internship, what does it really say about your organization, and does that matter to your organization? So some companies will be really focused on this. They will want it to be an experience for the employee. They want them to get to know the organization, get a feel for what they're like, and the way that the services are provided for mobility do that as a vehicle for them to get them really integrated into the culture of the company and foster the desire to want to come work for them. While some organizations don't see that experience as really important. So it's really important to understand from a business perspective how they view that as part of their brand of the organization. And does your organization need or want to compete against talent? And it really depends upon the company that you're supporting. So some organizations compete really hard for talent. And part of that competition will come down to the mobility support that you do provide for them when they're comparing offers. While some other organizations don't have the budgets to compete for talent, they may have programs that are a little bit more employee-contributed programs, but they're okay with that. but it's really having the discussion with the organization and the campus team and the businesses that are using the interns to understand, are they competing? Do they need to compete? Are they having trouble getting interns to apply or accept? And how can mobility, if anything, impact their ability to recruit talent? And then the last piece here is, what does your program say about your brand as mobility within your organization? If you're not being utilized by your campus departments for interns, how can you be viewed as that expert? You as mobility have a ton of information, a wealth of vendors and suppliers that provide great support for your mobility program, and it would be a shame for your intern population to not take advantage of some of that support and cost savings. So when you look at how much support you're providing the intern program, again, it's what does your brand say to those groups, and you want to make sure that you have a really good reputation with those groups as well. So next, Angela is going to take a look here at us as far as the levels of support and how you're going to be able to build your programs.
Yeah, so there are varying levels of support and associated philosophies to apply that support. And you'll want the support philosophy to correspond with the organization's branding and culture, like Kat was just talking about. With the limited support approach, the intern's costs, which can include travel to and from the internship location, transportation of some personal effects, housing, local transportation, miscellaneous expenses, those costs are defrayed, typically through a one-time lump sum payment. No other benefits or support are provided. So this would obviously be a hands-off approach. With the partial support option, costs are also defrayed, but interns are provided with a consultant or a contact person to assist them throughout their internship with items such as locating housing, coordinating certain services on their behalf, which could be, travel reservations, housing, shipment of effects. By offering a consultant, the company is able to enhance the intern's experience, which will really help to ensure the experience is a good one, which can in turn help to secure interns as permanent employees at the conclusion of the internship. And as we talked about, interns are assessing the company just as much as the company is assessing interns. With this partial support method, it's the most common approach and philosophy for applying intern programs. With full support, interns are reimbursed for most or all of their actual expenses, in addition to being provided with a consultant to act as a resource throughout the internship. When full support is provided, the most common benefits to provide include housing, travel to and from the internship, shipment of personal effects, or any combination of those benefits. With partial and full support methodologies, companies are really able to leverage the relationships they've established with the mobility suppliers used for relocation services, like Kathy was talking about. So it's really good to take advantage of those. So for example, the temporary housing provider can be resourced to take advantage of preferred pricing, direct bill relationships, if that benefit is being offered, coordination of services, and even to potentially turn some units into doubles or quads to further save on costs for either the intern or the company. When a lump sum is provided to defray expenses the intern will incur, there are different ways to determine and apply the lump sum. A flat amount would be a predetermined dollar value that can be paid once or monthly through either payroll or the RMC. The company can choose to offer the same amount for all interns, sort of a one-size-fits-all, or the amount could be based on certain criteria. Some of the criteria examples that we've listed here include distance between the intern school or residence and the internship location, the location of the internship, which can have an impact on cost of living. Is the internship in a remote location, a major metro area? Is the office downtown, which can have an impact on public transportation availability? Also, the level of the student. Are they a grad, an undergrad? Salary of the intern. This can be based on salary grade or band, or for example, providing an allowance equal to 1 month's salary. Companies can also consider the expenses they want to assist with. Do they want to help with housing, with transportation, etc.? Then the company really needs to determine if their goal is to cover actual expenses, maybe the average cost of the expenses that the company wants to cover, a range, or a percentage of the actual cost or the anticipated costs. Third parties like Rensheimer can be resourced to calculate actual or average costs, or the company can use historical data if that's available, or costs can be researched independently. And just as with the flat lump sum amount, this can be paid once or monthly through either payroll or the RMC. And then we also want to note that allowances are generally grossed up to either fully or partially cover the intern's tax liability. Tax assisting allowances really across the board in mobility is considered best practice for transparency. The dollar amount communicated is the dollar amount the intern sees in their bank account. Okay. Another method for applying support is through allowances to cover or assist with specific costs, like housing, transportation, shipment of effects. One or more allowances can be provided to assist with the anticipated expenses that we've been talking about. The same calculation methods that we just talked about on the previous slide for lump sum allowance can also apply here. And again, allowances should be tax assisted and can be paid either through payroll or the RMC. With the reimbursement or direct bill approach, the company covers all or some of the intern's actual expenses through either reimbursement or by having expenses billed directly back to the company for administrative ease. So again, this can include housing, transportation, shipment of effects, etc. And then the payment would be grossed up, again, to cover taxes and paid either through payroll or the RMC. Or companies can really take a hybrid approach and employ any combination of the assistance methodologies that we've covered. So for example, this could look like a lump sum allowance being provided along with reimbursement of actual housing expenses. And now for our next polling question regarding the type of support provided to interns. Please just take a moment to review the options that are available there and answer it as it relates to your organization. And while you do that, I will pass it back to Kathy.
Great, thanks, Ange. While we are waiting for our polling question to finish up here, let's take a look at our next topic, which is materials. So as you're looking at your program, it's important to assess the materials that actually touch the intern. Who gets what is the content in the information that they get? What is the purpose it's supposed to do for the intern? When do they get it and how do they get it? And so when you look at the internal stakeholders that are managing the program, take a look at the materials that they have that help them run and administer the program. Program compliance really stems on the ability for them to administer the program easily, having off-the-shelf materials that explain the program, how to apply the benefits, how to authorize people to different vendors if necessary, and the approval processes. So the clearer the materials, the easier the program is to administer for the internal stakeholders. As you have offer letter materials and acceptance materials that go out to the intern, in many cases there is information regarding mobility support in those documents, and it's important that the information is helpful for the employees from a recruiting standpoint to make the decision whether they're going to come or not, but then also from an acceptance standpoint, what is being provided, what are the expectations, what are the touch points as far as people that are going to be getting in touch with them and how they're going to be supported. For programs where there's not a lot of support provided for the employee and the employee is going to be on their own, it's important that the relocation materials have a lot of insight and direction in how the employee can self-help themselves and navigating through some of the relocation processes they're going to have to do as far as finding housing potentially, relocating out to the location, getting to and from the work site, etc. So any materials that can be provided as part of the relocation or the acceptance materials to help them through that process when your program is a little bit skinnier and the employee is on their own will help enable them to have a much better experience when the budget doesn't really provide the money to provide a very hands-on experience for the employee. And when you're looking at the information that goes to the employee, it's really understanding how to leverage technology and kind of the old school way of providing intern support. And I still see it sometimes used today as something is mailed to the intern, there's phone calls, and there's emails. Really understand what's available. You know, take a look at your mobility program today and the ways that your current mobility transferees and assignees are using technology. They're using portals. They're really relying on their cell phones, mobile phones, tablets, their computers, going to websites, self-servicing themselves, and really helping the campus teams understand, if they don't already have it in place, what technology is available for them that can really enhance the experience of the millennials going through the intern programs today, where they want to have access to information, they want to have information at their fingertips, they want to be able to start processes. If they're going to be self-serving themselves in navigating through housing or going to the new location, anything that you can provide them through a portal or through technology is super helpful, super supportive, and can make a big difference as far as the overall experience for the employee as they're going through the relocation process. It's also important to leverage your relocation vendors. You as mobility have these great relationships with vendors that provide different kinds of services for you. And they can be extremely helpful as you design your program and containing your costs for your program, and then even helping you support your internship programs. So from a design perspective, they can help you create a strategy. They work with other companies that move interns, leverage their experience of what's been working well. They probably have some innovative approaches or tools that you could leverage. So talk to them, see what they see. And I'm sure that they can provide some additional insight that might make your program a better program. They also have insight into the costs that are going to be making up your allowances or your program's budget. So definitely utilize them for the most appropriate cost information so that your budgets are correct and that you have a program that's efficiently fiscally responsible. And there can also be efficiencies from outsourcing. There are certain pieces that your vendors can do very easily for you that can ease up the workload for the internal folks that are managing the program. It doesn't hurt to explore how they could help you and see if it might impact the experience for both the internal stakeholders and the interns. From a cost perspective, definitely leverage your relationships. Work with the vendors for potential alternatives or cost savings. If you have, for example, a corporate housing vendors that you partner with and you're finding that your housing for your interns is really a big sticking point for budgets, talk to them about what they've done for other companies as far as leveraging, doubles and quads in an apartment, whether it's booking a bank of rooms, whether it's leveraging a local campus facility. There's lots of different creative ways that some of your vendors are already doing for their other customers that you could leverage as well to contain your costs. And also with some of the outsourcing of some of the work behind the scenes may in fact save you some costs on internal labor as well. From a support standpoint, they can help facilitate the program. They could be a point of contact for different parts of the program. I'm sure they have templates. We have lots of templates that we use here at SIRVA that would be really helpful for internal processes and the stakeholders that are creating the budgets and the cost projections and the approval processes. There may be something that already exists that could make the process work much better and more efficiently and support you better on the side of internally at the company. And then from the cost projection, the vendors could do the cost projections for you, provide them through technology, or provide you better insight into some costs that you would put into your cost projections. So there's lots of ways that your relocation vendors can assist you with that insight. Allison, could you show us our results of our last survey? Great, thank you. So as we're looking at the results, it looks like lump sum with some support is the highest program that we have right now, followed up with a combination, and we have 16% that do not provide support. So as you can see, it's kind of a little bit all over the place. which I'm not surprised because, again, one size doesn't fit all for our organizations, but it's really important to understand that you have options, that there are ways that you can be creative with how you're providing support. And it's just a matter of whether the support that you're providing is meeting the needs of your interns and it's supporting business initiatives. But it's nice to understand how other companies are doing it or other options so that you might be able to take a look at those and apply them towards your program to make your program a more efficient program. So once you've taken a look at your vendors and potentially how they could help you, then you can take a look at the whole process in itself and try to optimize it. Understanding the different phases that start from, getting the approval to provide the offer to the intern, the offer letters, the acceptance process, authorization to any support or vendors that might be providing support for them, and then the actual relocation process itself. And seeing where there can be efficiencies that can be picked up with your vendors, with internal help within the teams, whether it's the campus team, whether it's the mobility team, or with it's your vendors. But really understanding the process and how it flows will help you better understand how to apply the tools that you've been using for your mobility program to make your intern program work a little bit more efficiently. So Angela is going to take you through on how to evaluate your program.
Yeah, so when evaluating the program, we have summarized for you here some of the key components that we've sort of been talking through that you'll want to consider. Is the program easy to administer? Are processes and the experience streamlined as much as possible? If not, intern experience will be impacted, or the program might not be applied equitably or at all by business units or the business throughout the organization, resulting in an inequitable program. Is the program meeting stakeholder goals? Are reporting requirements and budgets being met? Are offers being accepted? If not, you won't have the buy-in you need to maintain a successful program. Is the program meeting intern needs? Is feedback positive? And again, are internship and subsequent employment offers being accepted? Is the intern experience reflective of what the business had originally intended? Or are there areas that should be beefed up or conversely pulled back? Does it seem there are areas in the program or process that could be more efficient to make the experience for the intern or the business better? And what is the message being sent by the program? Is it consistent with the organization's and the mobility group's brand? Again, you'll want to make sure you're maintaining a cohesive feel and experience. Okay, when evaluating the program, you may find a redesign is in order if, let's say, 2 or more of the following apply to your organization's intern program. The program is not being used by the business. The program is not being applied consistently across interns throughout the organization as intended. Both of these situations could mean benefits are not meeting business and or intern needs. Either they're too rich or the level of support is lacking, which can result in a lack of return on investment, interest from candidates, a high level of noise from interns, and low satisfaction scores. These are all red flags for a program that could potentially use some improvement. If interns, recruiters, or the business does not understand the program or its intent, if the program is not running smoothly, maybe the approval process takes too long, or collateral materials such as policies are not helpful or being utilized. If any of these items are true of your program, it may be worth the effort to redesign the program. And when doing so, just make sure to leverage your resources like your RMC, your corporate housing provider, and destination services providers. As you work through the process, make sure to ask yourself and your stakeholders questions like, can we improve the experience for interns or the business? Can we decrease costs, create efficiencies, or increase competitiveness? Can mobility better demonstrate its value to the organization through the program? The keys to success when developing or redesigning your program include understanding who your stakeholders are and engaging them by listening and collaborating with them to determine the best methodology for providing support for your organization. Come up with solutions that create tangible impacts and make the program easy and seamless to administer. Determine your change management plan for an effective and well-received rollout. Make sure the right people are doing the right jobs, which means leveraging both internal and external resources as appropriate, as well as leveraging technology. When the intern program is successful, it benefits the organization's mobility group by demonstrating its value, improving upon the brand's reputation, as well as creating broader brand awareness, containing costs through efficiencies, and applying support where it's needed and not where it's not crucial, aligning with business initiatives, and providing continuity of mobility support across programs. And now back to Kathy to take us through some case studies.
Great, thanks, Ange. What I thought might be helpful is to give you some insight into two different companies that had intern programs in place and the work that they did with their mobility departments to address some pain points. So in case study A, we have a program that's run primarily by the recruiting campus team. They were providing support for over 500 interns, and their program was a hybrid program. So they had a lump sum, and they were providing some support for housing and transportation. And while the employees were getting some support, they were still feeling, that the experience was not ideal and that they didn't ultimately feel supported even though they were getting some support. And the administration process for the campus team was really frustrating. There was a lot of manualness to it. It was kind of clunky, and they really felt that they needed some help creating some efficiencies for the process. So mobility was able to sit down with them and kind of take a look at the phases that they were going through and the information that they were sending out. And they were really able to see that the process needed to be tweaked. They removed a lot of the manual process. They were able to utilize some technology to make the process move a little bit quicker for them. So they were able to push out approvals and the offer letters much quicker and get faster turnaround time so that they weren't losing interns that they just couldn't follow up with that were getting kind of lost, and then they were choosing to go to other programs. The materials were looked at, and they found out that they had some explanation of mobility support, but it wasn't very prescriptive. It wasn't giving much detail. It was a little vague, and there was more of a sell that needed to happen in the materials to get them excited about the support that was being provided, because it was actually really good support that was being provided. So as the course of the deep dive on the process, the benefits all remained the same, but they changed some of the counseling that was going on with the employees about better plate setting some of the mobility pieces, enhancing some of the communications that were in the materials that they had after acceptance, so that even though there was some pieces that they still needed to coordinate themselves, they had more tools available to them and better counseling on how to prepare for it. So ultimately, in the end, the feedback was that the employees felt that they had more information at their fingertips. It wasn't a gray area anymore, and it was a much better experience overall. And then the internal experience improved significantly because timing was freed up, the manual processes were eliminated, so that whole mechanism internally for administering the program was a much better process. So everybody kind of won out on that one. In case study B, we have a program that is run in a combined effort through campus recruiting and through mobility. They were supporting about 200 interns, and they were providing allowances for support for the expenses. Some of the pain points the company was experiencing was an inconsistent application of the allowances, or sometimes they just weren't using the program at all. And the employee, if they weren't getting allowances or whether they were kind of comparing notes, and the experience just wasn't kind of ideal for the folks that weren't getting any allowances. There was a little bit of disappointment for the folks that, saw other people getting different benefits. And then from an internal process, the approval process with the cost projections and the internal approvals to even present offers to interns was very clunky, very manual. So it was kind of a frustrating process behind the scenes to even get the process started to have interns join the organization. So mobility sat down with the campus recruiters and the stakeholders and really talked about what they wanted to achieve and the way that it was being perceived by the interns. And it wasn't what they were looking for. They wanted it to feel different. They wanted it to be more reflective of the brand of the organization. So they really took a look at what they were providing the employees and modified their approach to it. While they were still providing essentially the same cost budget, it was packaged just a little bit differently. It was a program that hadn't been looked at for a long time, so the amounts were much more relevant. They could be defendable. And it was a program that was very easy to administer. And in the end, when businesses took a look at it with campus recruiting, there was much more adoption of the program, and there wasn't many people trying to modify the program because it really better met their needs at this point, the way that it was designed. They made it really easy to use. They created some really nice tools for the managers and for the campus folks to have to be able to explain it. They updated the materials that went out to the employees. So even though they might not be getting full support, they did have a lot of information about what they were getting and ways to help themselves. Then they also took a look at a relationship they had with one of their vendors and some technology that was available, and they were able to apply that for the interns, which was super helpful. It was very well received by the businesses. It provided a lot of touch. It provided a lot of fulfillment for the employees to go out and do some research for themselves. So it was a great use of, really taking a look at an opportunity to improve the experience, provide a better support for the employee, provide better tools for the internal teams to administer their program. So like everybody won out on this one because the time that they took, while it was a short window of time, it was such a big difference to the program. And then the partnership that was felt between campus and mobility and the businesses is just so great for the brand of mobility within a company. So there were so many things that were achieved by going through this exercise. And then ultimately the interns really had a much better experience with the organization. So with that, we've talked about how to design a program, how to redesign your program. So once you have your program in place, it's really important to maintain it. And by that, I mean really just taking a look at how it's performing, taking a look at the data to see, how many moves you have that are interns, how they're going through the phases in the pipeline, how easy and efficient it is, and then understanding through that data if there's anything that needs to be looked at for the following year, or are there any quick hits that can be done to the program now to make it flow a little bit better if you see that it's flowing not as smoothly as it should. From a cost perspective, providing insight for the businesses as far as their costs, and if there's any opportunities for cost savings that you're finding throughout the year to share with them. From the employee experience and then the internal customer experience, taking a look at those survey scores, having discussions with the internal stakeholders on the feedback that they're getting from the interns and from the business and from themselves about how the process is working. Also taking a look at return on investment. The money that the businesses are spending for the interns, is it paying off for them? Are they able to find and groom talent? Are they able to get their business initiatives completed during the time frame that the interns are on site doing the work? Just to make sure this exercise of pulling people in for the short period of time is really benefiting the organization the way that they need it to, and that you have the data that you can help them with that. So as we wrap up our discussion today, we really want to just highlight 3 things for you to take away from today's discussion. That your program really is a reflection of your brand. As you look at the benefits that are provided through mobility and the experience that the employee has, experiencing the company and the support, is that what you want to have out there in the marketplace? And helping the business understand that the program support that they are providing is out there and it is a reflection of them, and helping them understand if that needs to be modified. But then don't forget about your brand as mobility and how that can be enhanced through these relationships with the campus teams. If you are helping today make it a better program, or if they're not utilizing you today, helping them understand how that you have access to information, services, and vendors that could make the process easier for them and could potentially provide some cost savings for the business in the long run. Leveraging your resources. We talked about all the great ways that your current vendors that support you on the mobility side can provide you the same kind of assistance for your campus teams. Again, if they're not being managed through mobility and they're managed through a campus team, It's giving your campus team visibility to the vendors and how they could be impactful, either from a support perspective, a design perspective, or from a cost savings perspective. And then really listen to your stakeholders. Over the years, I have heard, unfortunately, many stakeholders within an organization say, nobody heard me, nobody listened to me. And it really was just the communication of what they were trying to say, just wasn't getting back to the right people within mobility. So it's really talking to the different stakeholders, finding out who those stakeholders are, and listening to how the process is working. Are they able to meet their initiatives? Is the business able to meet their objectives? And coming up with creative ways for you to show the value that you have in mobility that you can bring to their side of the house to help support the interns and the business objectives. So with that, I want to thank you everyone for joining us, and we did have a couple quick questions that we could go through. One of the questions was, what is the best practice for a calculation? Is it a calculation? Is it a lump sum? And there's really no one answer that's kind of best practice. It's really what works best for your organization. Some organizations use lump sum flat amounts as part of their normal mobility process and for other benefits. So a flat lump sum works just fine from a calculation standpoint. Other organizations like to have the insight into the calculations and to be able to make differences based on distance or level or caliber of the business that you're working in. So it just really depends. It's just a matter, I think what makes it best practice is if it's easy to administer, it's concise, and it supports the business the way that it needs to be supported from an experience perspective and from a budget standpoint, then it's the best practice for the way that that organization needs to coordinate their benefits. One of the other questions that we had is that there's some noise that this individual says from the business around cost and experience, and we see that a lot as well. The business wants this great experience, but they don't want to pay for it. We see that on the mobility side as well, too. We found from just the information that you can provide to the employee sometimes can bridge that gap of not providing benefits. So, for example, if you're only going to provide partial support for some benefits, let's say housing, a lump sum or an allowance, and the employee has to go secure the housing themselves and pay for the delta of the cost of the housing. If you can provide them access to technology or to resources in the destination location that can help them navigate through how to find housing, how to maybe connect with other interns, that's where you can bridge the gap of having an experience that's a better experience of being left on their own to kind of fend for themselves and figure it out versus providing some tools and some networking to the employee to be able to do it effectively on their own with little support. That really adds to the experience for the employee where you're not able to necessarily provide it from a monetary standpoint.
I hear too where, in this situation, it sounds like the company wants the high touch and maybe the business units can't support it from a budget standpoint. And a lot of times I hear that different business units within the organization have different budgets or, different amounts of money that they can apply towards mobility. In this situation, you might be able to build in some flexibility into the program where it's appropriate that can still maintain employee experience while keeping costs in mind, especially for some of the business units. Again, though, we just want to make sure that the program is equitable so that employees within the same business unit at the same level or interns receive the same level of support, that there's some rhyme or reason around who's getting what. So yeah, maybe some flexibility or using some of those no-cost employee experience enhancers, just to, like Kathy was talking about, helping them with things so that they feel like they're being taken care of, but not necessarily even if their costs aren't being covered. So that's another couple ideas. Looks like there's another question here, Kathy, that maybe you might have a good answer for. I have an international rotation program for interns. Are there any best practices or recommendations for managing immigration and tax compliance for interns working in 4 to 6 month rotations in various countries?
From our side of the house, from mobility, I don't have any best practice to share, but that is definitely something that we could go back with some of our partners on the immigration side to come forward with some best practices for that.
And I don't know if we're able to get back our polling results. We had a question on the percent of companies that give a lump sum for intern expenses. We can potentially follow up with that too in when the presentation is.
Yeah, I'll get the information later. Unfortunately, I've closed it out now, but I'd be happy to follow up with that person.
Great.
Okay. There's another question that just popped in. What are interns expecting? Do they expect companies to have temporary housing figured out for them? Do they prefer receiving a lump sum and look for their own housing? I think it completely depends on the intern, the population, maybe what's being what's competitive for that, geographic location or that expertise that is being sought after. It totally depends, and what's provided depends on the company, regardless of necessarily what's being expected. As long as it's clearly outlined what will be provided and what the company can help with, and then resources to help the intern. If housing isn't being covered, at least providing them with resources to set them off in the right direction. Anything to add there, Kathy?
I think that's all we have right now.
Okay. All right, then. Well, we can go ahead and close it out then. Thank you very much to Kathy and Angela for an excellent presentation today. Thank you for sharing your insights, and a very special thank you to SIRVA for their sponsorship of this webinar. You all have been a wonderful audience. I hope you've enjoyed the program today. Just a quick reminder, keep your eye on the Worldwide ERC website. We are constantly adding new events, and watch your emails for information on how you can access a copy of the handout and review the recording for this presentation. It will come to you this afternoon from messenger@webex.com. Thank you all again. Have a great afternoon, and you may now disconnect.